Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Surah Hud, chapter 11. We will cover verses 69 to 83. The account of the nation of Lut will be covered in these verses. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any question or query regarding this presentation or even regarding other presentations. Recap verses 61 to 68 of Surah Hud. The people of the messenger Saleh were sent the guidance of Allah and were reminded about the bounties which they utilized for their benefit. However, those in a position of power and wealth decided to continue transgressing the laws of Allah and deliberately created imbalances in the society. Saleh was accused of giving up on the religion of their forefathers and was told to revert to the path of their ancestors. And we should remember that all messengers were born in that society and they inherited all that belief system, whatever was prevalent at that time among people. But they came out of it because they questioned their own existence and those belief systems, and then proceeded in the light of the wahi of Allah. However, he refused and instead warned them about the consequences of their evil path in life. He pointed out to them clearly and emphatically that the law of requital does not spare anyone and that the destruction is awaiting them on the path being pursued by them. He warned them not to create class divisions in the society and to share the natural resources of the earth provided by Allah with everyone. For this, they agreed with Saleh to use a she-camel as a sign from Allah and that it should be allowed to graze freely in the land. If we remember that he came to some kind of an agreement with the people because he insisted on equitable distribution of wealth as well as land resources. And they agreed with him, apparently, but underneath, they were not happy with that agreement. They went against this agreement and killed the she-camel, and as a consequence, accelerated the process of their own destruction. Their physical life was cut short through the destruction of their homes, and of course, all of them were killed. Messenger Saleh and Jamaat Momineen, they left the area before the destruction and then managed to establish the system of deen wherever they settled down. Summary of main points of today's presentation. Like the accounts of other past nations, here details are covered about the nation of the messenger Lut. The account begins with the arrival of envoys of Allah at the house of the messenger Ibraheem. They provide glad tidings of a son to him, and his wife is surprised by this news as she thinks she is old and cannot bear a child. These messengers from Allah also tell Ibrahim that they are on a mission to the messenger Lut and that they are going to inform him regarding the imminent destruction of his people because of their evil deeds. These messengers then arrive at the habitation of Lut. The people of the town arrive at the dwelling place of Lut to cause problems to these guests of his, and this becomes the source of anxiety for him. However, the messengers inform Lut to flee from his habitation during the night, as the punishment will descend on these people early next morning. The messenger, accompanied by the Momineen, leave the area during the night, and the whole town is destroyed through a volcanic eruption in the morning. Let us go to the first two verses of today's presentation, 69 and 70, focus and precision required in human relations. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَتْ رُسُلُنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ بِالْبُشْرَى قَالُوا سَلَامًا قَالَ سَلَامٌ فَمَا لَبِثَ أَنْ جَاءَ بِعِجْلٍ حَنِيذٍ فَلَمَّا رَأَى أَيْدِيَهُمْ لَا تَصِلُ إِلَيْهِ نَكِرَاهُمْ وَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفَةً قَالُوا لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّا أُرْسِلْنَا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِ لُوطٍ. And this is the same way in which the people of Lut became destroyed. This account is like this, that Allah sent his messengers to Messenger Ibrahim, who gave him a glad tidings, which is mentioned further on. They passed on a wish of peace to Ibrahim, in response to which Ibrahim also returned a similar desire. And after that, without any hesitation, he presented a roasted lamb before them so that his guests could be served. But he saw that those guests do not touch the food. Seeing this, he became somewhat apprehensive about them and in his heart felt a danger. because they were not eating the food. They refused to do that. And because of that, because it was the custom of their land that whoever enters someone's home with a bad intention, he will not eat their food. When they sensed this apprehension in Ibrahim, that is the messengers, they sensed this apprehension in the messenger Ibrahim, they said, do not be afraid. We are sent to the people of Lut so that before their destruction, the matter is concluded. In the same way that before the destruction of the Thamud, the matter was concluded via the she-camel of the messenger Saleh. Now, some reflections on these two verses. Part of this account has also been covered in Surah Al-Hijr in verses 15, 51 to 74. There, these messengers are called guests of Ibrahim. It appears that these messengers were not previously known to the messenger Ibrahim. However, they knew about him and the circumstances of his family. It is interesting that the Quran has gone into the finer details of the inner apprehension of the messenger Ibrahim when he tried to serve them a specially prepared meal of roasted meat, and they did not partake of this. Possibly they were not hungry. The point to note over here is that the precision and firmness in the conduct of these messengers, that they were so focused on the mission for which they had come to the messenger Ibrahim and the mission for which they were proceeding towards messenger Lut, and they never got distracted because of food or because of other issues related to being a guest. They explained to Ibrahim that they are on their way to the messenger Lut to inform him regarding the fate of his nation. It appears that the place of abode of Ibrahim was on their path, so they were given the duty from Allah to carry out two important assignments. And the important thing over here for us is that it all requires careful planning aspect for us. There is also a point about effective communication here for us. Always explain issues in detail so that these apprehensions do not become created. And if these are created, then this has to be explained so that people are not left with any suspicion or doubt, so that people are clear about their duties and responsibilities. This also helps to eliminate any fear and apprehension. Verses 71 to 72, glad tidings for the family of Ibrahim. وَامْرَأَتُهُ قَائِمَةٌ فَضَحِكَتْ فَبَشَّرْنَاهَا بِإِسْحَاقَ وَمِنْ وَرَاءِ إِسْحَاقَ يَعْقُوبَ قَالَتْ يَا وَيْلَتَى أَأَلِدُ وَأَنَا عَجُوزٌ وَهَذَا بَالِي شَيْخًا إِنَّ هَذَا لَا شَيْءٌ عَجِيبٌ. The wife of Ibrahim was also standing nearby. On hearing this, she felt reassured. She became contented in her heart that there is nothing to fear. At this time, we gave her glad tidings of the birth of Ishaq, and also that after Ishaq, a grandson Yaqub will be born to them, and in this way, in this land, after the destruction of Lut, his generation will multiply. And as we know, Ishaq and Yaqub both were messengers of Allah who also received wahi from Allah as guidance. At this, the wife of Ibrahim said that this is a very strange and unexpected thing for me, that at this stage when I have become old, we will have progeny, and then this husband of mine has also become old. To have progeny in these conditions is surprising indeed. Additional comments on these two verses. A few points of interest for us. Firstly, the arrival of children to righteous parents should be viewed by them as an important episode in their life for the good of mankind. The birth of a son here is linked to the continuation of the spreading of the message of Allah. And that is important for us to note, that when Quran gives them glad tidings, it is in relation to the propagation of the system of deen. And that is something which we need to keep in mind, because we have also come to this path, and that is the way we should view the world. Secondly, our attention is drawn to the fact that righteous parents need to impart education, training, and development of the self to their children, and to never let this view become obscured that this finite physical life of ours has a higher purpose. If we wish to have a better world in the future, then we need to work for it 24/7. Thirdly, when we become Momineen, then each event in our life should be viewed in the light of the wahi of Allah. The late arrival of a son is viewed with a special context in this account of the messenger Ibrahim and his family. These children played an important role in relation to the system of deen. For example, we have gone through a number of details under the account of Hazrat Yusuf in chapter 12. Next verse, 1173, righteous families given glad tidings. Qalu atajabina min amrillahi rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu alaykum ahlal bayti innahu hamidun majid. At this day, that is, the guest said to her, why are you taken aback at the affairs of Allah? O members of the family, these are but the glad tidings of Allah's rahmat and barakat upon you. And that is important because if we look at rahmat, this comes from the root raham, and barakatahu has also, wherever the word bay and ray come, that means it has implicit in it development and growth. It is only through these rahmats of his that it can be known how greatly deserving of hamd and appreciation he is, that is Allah, and how great a bestower of prosperities. Let us look at a few more points in relation to this verse, further elaboration. Here the Quran has reassured both Ibrahim and his wife that all this is part of the plan of Allah. And this can be figured out by anyone that by following the path of Allah, things do shape up differently, and where He provides guidance in this regard. Even under the worst of circumstances, we need to keep a close focus on the guidance of Allah. That is Amrullah. His schemes are carried out through humans like us. By quoting two aspects, Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuhu, the Quran has summed up for us as human beings that we should strive to create a family environment wherein nourishment and growth take place continually, even in small steps. So the efforts which we make within the confines, within the domain of family, do not go unnoticed. Here, Quran has put a great emphasis on that when it says that this family is blessed by Allah because of their righteousness, because of their iman and doing salih deeds. Two divine attributes need to be acquired and manifested with other attributes. For example, over here, i.e., Hamidun Majid. Those aspects which deal with acquiring highly developed potentials, that is related to Hamid, because Hamad means that all those duties, all those responsibilities which Allah has taken on himself, we carry out those responsibilities in the world so that people appreciate that the system given by Allah, how great it is, how good it is for the mankind, and their abundance in our individual and collective life, and that emanates from Majid, that it has to be abundant. It should not be just adequately meeting the needs of people. It should be more than the needs of the people. Next two verses, 74 and 75, the Quran provides guidance to cope with the collective consequences of self-destruction. فَلَمَّا ذَهَبَ عَنْ إِبْرَاهِيمَ الرَّوْءُ وَجَاءَتْهُ الْبُشْرَى يُجَادِلُنَا فِي قَوْمِ لُوطٍ Inna Ibrahima la halimun awwahu munib. When these apprehensions which were created in the heart of Ibrahim due to them were dissipated, and he also became even more reassured at the glad tidings of a son, he began to inquire about the people of Lut, about why are they being annihilated. And this is natural, for we can also experience it, that when we are under stress, our outlook is a bit limited. We are distressed and worried. But once that worry and distress is taken over, we are able to see the things in a wider perspective. There is no doubt in this that Ibrahim possessed great patience and tolerance. Thus, he did not react impulsively at every minor issue. But at the same time, he possessed a very kind heart, due to which he empathized with great intensity with the hardship of others. This was the reason why he felt this way at the news of the destruction of the people of Lut. So the messenger Ibrahim, he felt that this nation is going to be destroyed, and probably he knew about them as well because he knew the messenger Lut. So he started to go through those issues with these messengers. But at the same time, his character was such that for the decision in every matter, he turned towards us. Hence, his kind-heartedness never used to prevail above obedience to the laws. And he tried to argue with these messengers if there is any possibility of averting it or maybe delaying it. But over here, Quran is very particular about that, and that will be covered in the next verse. Now, further comments on these two verses. A few points of interest for our guidance are noted in these two verses. Firstly, events in the human world result from our choices and actions in the world as we live our lives. The Quran asks us to relate these events and their outcomes within the permanent values as well as the relative values of man-made systems. Because we can only come to right conclusions if we know on what values the existing man-made system is being managed and running. And then we know what are we missing, what is the importance of running this system under the permanent values. And the difference will be very evidently clear with us that there are gross injustices done under the man-made systems. This helps to compare and contrast the outcomes. Secondly, it helps in our own education and training. And this is important because if we do not understand the man-made system, how are we going to understand the system of Deen? Because it has to be transitional, it has to move from the man-made system towards the system of Deen. And in evaluating the state of development of our own self. Here the messenger Ibraheem appears to argue with these messengers about the fate of the people of Lut. However, he alters his opinion based on the facts presented to him, though the Quran does not go into their details. And this is something which we have to figure out our own selves by relating to the world in which we live. Thirdly, being inclined to be kind and compassionate also demands that we should look at the facts before us, the consequences of the deeds of others, and the matter of the establishment of Deen. Because if we, being the beneficiaries of the existing man-made system and think that it should continue like this, then we should forget about the system of Deen. Then we will never go on to the next stage, and we will never be ready for the next stage. And that is the point we should keep in mind. If we wish the system to be established, then we need to look at things keeping in mind this thing. Next verse, the law of requital is immutable. Ya Ibraheemu arid an haza, innahu kad ja'a amru rabbika, wa innahum atihim azabun ghairu mardud. The important part over here in this verse is innahu kad ja'a amru rabbika. That is, Rabb has come here as an attribute. They said, "O Ibrahim, leave this idea aside that nation becomes saved from destruction, because it's not going to be saved from destruction just because you are trying to argue about it. The reality is that according to the law of your Rabb, the time for the manifestation of the results of the deeds of this nation has arrived. Now that destruction is about to visit them, which cannot be reversed." Further comments on this verse. This verse makes clear the issues mentioned in the previous two verses. The Quran guides Ibrahim that Allah's law of requital is immutable, and when the minimum well-defined threshold is crossed by the collective conduct of a nation, then the law of Rububiyyah demands that the next stage should commence. Because the next stage cannot commence unless the previous stage has been completed. All man-made systems have their expiry dates decided in direct proportion to their deeds. When this date arrives, then they need to be eliminated, and the desires and prayers of anyone have no effect. Such recompense arrives according to the law of Mashiach of Allah. Verses like this should be used as a reminder by us, i.e. the students of the Quran, so that we do not waver in our firm resolve on this path of Deen. We also need to continue to remind others within our domain of responsibility. Next verse 1177, the Quran points to effects on human psyche. وَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ رُسُلُنَا لُوطًا سِيَّ بِهِمْ وَذَاقَ بِهِمْ زَرْعًا وَقَالَ هَذَا يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ. Hence, after taking their leave of Ibrahim, when our emissaries reached Lut, he became worried because of them, and due to his feeling of helplessness, he thought in his heart that today is a day of great calamity. Let us see what happens. And this was natural because Messenger Lut knew the conditions under which he was living. The town has more or less completely become evil, and they were opposing him. And he knew that at this point, if some newcomers come to him, how they are going to be treated by those people around him. The reason for his concern was that he knew what kind of treatment people there extended to newly arrived strangers. And because these newcomers were also staying with Lut, hence he even became more distressed. Because those people of the town, they hated everything related to Lut. They knew that he is the most righteous person among them, and he keeps giving them warning about their evil conduct. Further reflection on this verse. This verse sums up the state of development of the people of Lut, who had become so depraved that they had no respect even for the visitors in their town. Since they despised the messenger Lut for his righteous conduct, they extended the same treatment to these guests of his too. A few points of interest in relation to the human psyche merit our attention. Firstly, note the anxiety and anguish of the messenger Lut, noted by the Quran here, which shows that Allah does take into account the distress caused by an unjust system. And it's a beauty that the Quran has noted these feelings of his and knew the cause for that as well. And the messenger of Allah also knew that these guests are going to create problem for him. The helplessness felt by the messenger is taken into account and contributes to the irreversible punishment which ensues this visit. And of course, Messenger Lut did not know at this time that the punishment is very close by. This means we need to be aware of this state around us caused by non-deen systems. Secondly, the messenger noted that this state of distress and anxiety is not going to be infinite and will end at some point in time. Because he had Iman and he knew that these things are not going to last forever, and hopefully some help will arrive. 1178, immoral state of the people of Lut. وَجَاءُهُ قَوْمُهُ يُهْرَعُونَ عَلَيْهِمْ وَمِنْ قَبْلُ كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ هَؤُلَاءِ بَنَاتِي هُنَّ أَطْهَرُ لَكُمْ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُخْزُونِي فِي ضَيْفِي أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. A number of points covered in this verse about the state of those people. Having heard of the news of the arrival of strangers, the people of Lut came rushing towards them in a state of intoxication. That means they were keeping an eye on what Lut was doing and who was visiting him and who was leaving his house. They had been long addicted to practicing abominations. He said to them, "O my people, here are your wives who are like my daughters whom you have discarded. They are more proper companions for you. You should therefore turn to them. You should adhere to Allah's laws and do not grieve me in the matter of my guests. Is there no right-minded man amongst you who can act righteously and not let reason and sense lie from sight?" And see, what happens is that the family life is destroyed whenever the evil spreads. And that is why this disease of homosexuality spread through that town. And this is, we can observe even in today's world what is happening to the family life and to the education and training of children. And this is the point which we should keep in mind as we go through this account. All evil deeds lead towards self-destruction. When the people of his town heard about these visitors of Lut, they ran to him and desired to do evil to them. And evil over here does not mean that only this salient issue was infected or was affecting those people. It was far bigger, but Quran, of course, takes out the major sin or major crime of each nation. The people of Lut indulged openly in homosexuality, and the Quran has pointed to this perversion of theirs as the main cause for their destruction. We need to note that it takes generations for results to materialize under the law of Allah. Here the messenger Lut reminds them again that under the natural biological order created by Allah, the relationship is between a man and a woman within the context of a family. This aspect covered in detail in Surah Yusuf. Then Lut once again warns them in the presence of these messengers of Allah that the conduct of these people is causing him great pain and distress and that they should refrain from doing this. Finally, he sums up the state of evil of these people by stating a fact that, "Is there not a single one among you who is righteous?" If you remember in the case of Hazrat Nuh as well, when he says that these people, that is his nation, has reached that stage that there is no hope of any more people coming among them, even children who are not infected by the evil these people are doing and spreading in the land. When evil spreads like cancer, then it reaches everywhere within a nation. Next to verses 79 and 80, we need to warn people about perversion. قالوا لقد علمت ما لنا في بناتك من حق وإنك لتعلم ما نريد قال لو أن لي بكم قوة أو آوي إلى ركن شديد. They replied, you know very well that we do not have any interest in the women whom you call your daughters, and you also know what our intention is. A lot is implicit in this small part of this verse, where we can relate it to the world in which we live. Lut replied that, how I wish I myself possessed the strength or had some other powerful support with the help of which I could prevent you from these actions. Further comments on these two verses. These two verses need to be related to the world in which we live today. The question which comes to mind is, why do people resort to sexual perversions, knowing it to be an evidence-based fact that at a fundamental level, the process of procreation is through a relationship between a man and woman? The Quran goes much beyond this and invites us to become Momineen in order to create a family structure with which children can achieve the status of Hasan Takveen. And I've quoted this verse 2 to 21, in which the precondition for marriage is also stated. Here, the Quran has guided us in this regard that once sexual perversion acquires the form of a widespread evil, then people's psyches change and they become arrogant and ignore every warning. So they are not going to go back from this position which they have acquired over a long period of time. Their minds literally become very evil. This is that state of becoming deaf, dumb, and blind to which the Quran has referred to in a number of verses. Such people then lose their right to exist in Allah's world and their physical stay is cut short. Because all of us, all human beings are going to die at some place. So over here, the law of requital, what it does is that their physical stay in this world is cut short because they create so much fasad on Allah's land, then they cross that threshold, that time of respite ends for them. The second verse invites us to come to the conclusion, just like the messenger Lut, in order to accelerate the law of requital. 1181, the law of requital is a blessing for Momineen. قالوا يا لوط إن رسل ربك لن يصلوا عليك فأسر بأهلك بقطع من الليل ولا يلتفت منكم أحد إلا امرأتك إنه مصيبها ما أصابهم إن موعدهم الصبح أليس الصبح بقريب. The guests of Lut said, do not worry, we are emissaries of your Rabb and have come to them in order to settle the matter once and for all. These people will not be able to overwhelm you. So they allayed the fear of Lut that as if these people are going to harm the messengers or even the messenger Lut. So these emissaries of Allah, these messengers from Allah, they told him not to worry about it. Over here, they will not be able to do any harm to us as well as to you. You will remain protected from their transgressions. So there is a great lesson for us as of today. What you need to do is that when part of the night has passed, then get out of this place, taking your companions with you, and leave this land with such conclusiveness that you do not even turn around to glance back at this place. All of your companions will leave with you, except your wife, who will not accompany you, because she associates herself with the other group. Hence, she will face the same fate which the others are about to face. The time for their destruction has been fixed for the morning, and there is not much time left for the morning. Some finer aspects of this verse. The visiting messengers of Allah came to the rescue of Lut and told him not to distress himself with the conduct of these people. In fact, the psychological state of the messenger Lut indicates why these messengers were sent towards him, just to provide him, but not only the time of the destruction of those people, but also to provide him reassurance. They are doing what they are meant to do through the choices they have made. They are beyond repair, and the time has arrived for their ultimate reckoning. Here, the Quran has not gone into further details. For example, what subsequently transpired between these visitors and the people of the town who had gathered near the abode of Lut. His messengers briefed Lut regarding the impending punishment and asked him to start preparing to quit the town together with those who had accepted Iman. However, he is also informed that his wife will refuse to accompany him as she will prefer to stay with the rest of the evil crowd whose fate is sealed due to their evil deeds. Because people who go against Allah's wahi, Allah's guidance, they think they are succeeding. They think that they have enough physical strength to survive any impending punishment. Firstly, they don't think that the punishment will come, this destruction will come. And then they see around their houses and see around the system which is established, and they say, no, this system cannot be destroyed. It is so strong. And this we see even in today's world as well. Note the precise time of destruction in this account is given to the early morning when the people will be fast asleep. Verses 82 to 83, we need to discover the scales. فَلَمَّا جَاءَ أَمْرُنَا جَعَلْنَا عَالِيَهَا سَافِلَاهَا وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهَا حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ مَنْضُودٍ مُّسَوَّمَةً عِندَ رَبِّكَ وَمَا هِيَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ بِبَعِيدٍ. Consequently, when the time for this destruction arrived, then all the tall buildings of this habitation came tumbling down and became flattened. One blast of the volcano turned it upside down, and after this, its large rocks started to rain down on them, like persistent and endless rain. Those stones began to descend upon them as a message of death from the direction of Allah. There is a lot of precision in these two verses, and we should look at Lugat al-Quran if we are interested to figure out further details. This is because, according to the law of requital, the punishment of destruction is never far from unjust people, lest it takes time to reach there, and in the meantime, they take protective measures for themselves. Because the way law of requital works is that once the time of respite ends, then people do not get any time for any physical protection, or they think they will escape it. Ultimately, the law of requital catches up with the criminals. In these two verses, the Quran has noted precisely and graphically how the punishment was meted out to the evil people of that town. A few points require reiteration. Firstly, the punishment arrived as a consequence of their deeds as per the law of requital. It was not that Allah did any wrong to them, people did wrong to themselves, and they were adequately warned over many years by Hazrat Lut. Allah did not do an injustice to them by cutting short their physical life. Rather, this was due to their own evil conduct about which they were warned repeatedly. Because they were writing their own fate, they were writing their own life history, that what they were doing, those results were chasing them, they were going with them, and they suddenly started to manifest in their real life. Lut and the Momineen needed to be helped, and this is part of the functioning of the law of requital. So the important lesson for us is that we should have a Jamaat-e-Momineen. We should have that kind of entity which can then accelerate the law of requital in the world. If there is no Jamaat-e-Momineen, then all of this account becomes meaningless for us, because it has no significance. Because all this, if we see then in all these accounts, Jamaat-e-Momineen are the ones who are being helped. And that is why the law of requital then accelerates. It becomes more effective. The punishment in this case arrived through a volcanic eruption which rained down stones on the population. As it was an event during the early hours of the morning when everyone was fast asleep after their confrontation with Lut and his visitors, hence they all had no way to escape it. The Quran has pointed to this aspect and mode of punishment in other verses. It was not a random event, but was a precise and focused and dealt a final blow to those who do injustice on Allah's land. It was not just a natural event, which people say that one could anticipate as well. But even if people could anticipate, they did not leave their place because their psyche had become such that they became very arrogant and very stubborn. They did not want to give up on all the benefits which they enjoyed by living in those houses and in that town. And then they were also opposing the messenger Lut, and they said that we do not accept his warning. He is continuously telling us that they are following the evil path. It may cross our minds that why does this not seem to work in our world today? And as I've noted earlier, the answer to this is that a Jamaat Momineen has to emerge, and that Jamaat Momineen has to follow within the permanent values of the Quran and has to have a very absolute conviction that they are looking for the system of deen. The answer to this lies in meeting the conditions of becoming a Jamaat Momineen. All the accounts of the messengers noted in the Quran are contingent on the presumption that a Jamaat Momineen exists in the land. And with that, we come to the end. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of deen.